Each month, Tony budgets 1/2 of his income for rent and 1/8 of his income for utilities. What fraction of his income is left for other expenses? So let's make sure that we understand what this problem is talking about. Tony budgets 1/2 of his income for rent, and then there's another 1/8 of his income that goes for utilities. So those two together, that portion of his income is gone. Now pay close attention to what we're being asked. We're not being asked how much of his income goes to rent and utilities. We're being asked what fraction of his income is left for other expenses. So we want to be close attention to be sure we answer what's being asked. So let's start here. Let's start by figuring out, well, how much of his income is used for rent and utilities? What fraction of it is gone? So if we're trying to figure out the 1/2 that goes to rent and the 1/8 that goes to utilities, if we add those together, that will tell us the fraction of his income that is used for those two expenses. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got 1/2 is going to the rent, plus another 1/8 is going to utilities. So let's see how we would go ahead and add those two fractions. Remember, we need a common denominator if we're going to be adding fractions, and so the common denominator, if one of the denominators is a 2 and the other one is an 8, the common denominator is going to be 8. That's going to be the smallest number that both 2 and 8 will go into evenly. Okay? So the last fraction, the 1/8, already has that denominator, so we can just put that 1/8 there again. But 1/2 we're going to have to change. So let's go ahead and change our denominator, and in the process change our numerator as well. 2 is going to have to get multiplied by 4 to give me 8. So if the denominator gets multiplied by 4, so does the numerator, and 4 times 1 is 4. Now that we've got the same denominator, we can go ahead and do the addition. We know that the denominator is going to stay the same, and when I add the numerators, 4 plus 1, that's going to give me 5 for my new numerator. So 5/8. What is that 5/8? Remember that that was the portion of his income that's for rent and utilities. So he uses 5/8 of his income for rent and utilities. And I'm just making a note to myself so I remember that, but I'm not answering the question because they want to know what is left for other expenses. Well, if we think about his income as his whole income for the month, he's got his one whole income that comes in every month. So we want to think about that one whole income. From that, we have to take off what's being used for rent and utilities in order to figure out what's left over for other things. So we're going to be doing 1 minus 5/8. And so we've got a couple of ways to think about that. And one of those ways is to say, let's change the 1 to a fraction. So 1 over 1 minus 5 over 8. Now let's change this 1 over 1 to a fraction. Well, we know that if something's going to equal 1, the numerator and the denominator both have to be the same. We're going to change that to 8 over 8. So my denominators are going to be the same. Notice that's just what I'd get if I multiplied it by 8 over 8 this way. So 8 over 8, we're going to subtract 5/8. 8/8 minus 5/8 tells us that there's 3/8 of his income that's left for other things. So 3/8 of the income is left. And that's the question that we were being asked to answer. So just be sure, keep going back to the original problem to make sure that you've answered the question that was asked of you.